Hello again, and welcome to War Stories, behind the scenes tales from the front lines of the media. I am your host, Tom Curley, and welcome to show number 9. We are just on a roll. I don't know whether it's a Kaiser roll or just a regular hoagie, but we are doing it. And we've got a lot of fun stuff today because first off, we are bringing in, of course, my cohort in crime, the inimitable, which I still think is not a word, Garry Armstrong. Garry, how the hell are you?
I love it.
I love it. Yes, you love it.
I
Wait,
could
wait,
be better. My proviso at the top of today's show is that I've had 2 days with the Registry of Motor Vehicles and I've survived, but I'm not in a good place. I remain convinced that the RMV in any state is the devil's spawn.
Yes, that is absolutely true. So, but we also have a special guest, a new member of our crowd. I would like to welcome Mr. Peter Savioli. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You can talk. You're on the air.
Oh, okay. Looking forward to this. I haven't really been involved with Garry for quite a while. He's ugly as ever. But he's getting better looking as he gets older.
Oh, well, I thank you very much. I didn't
Come on,
expect
Garry.
that one.
Come on, come on.
All kidding aside, the three of us, as we sit here jabbering away, we're beholden to other people in our mutual lives who've helped us to get to where we are. I would say Peter Savioli is one of perhaps a half a dozen people that I would have to say thank you to for me being able to have the professional life I've had. When I jumped from radio in New York to my first gig in television in Hartford, Connecticut, I was a fish out of water, so to speak, and Peter literally helped me get through that, and I learned a lot from him, seriously, and how to do it the right way. And Peter, that's as positive a setup as I can give you.
Well, thank you,
Peter,
for all those accolades and everything. Yeah, but well, it was interesting when this is Channel 18 in Hartford. It was an RKO General independent station. We weren't affiliated with any networks, so we had to do all our own programming. And at that time, I had worked at 2 other stations in the New England area, and I was at Channel 18 as a production manager, voiceover guy, producer, director, jack of all trades. And the reason I liked working for an independent station is because they usually were not union controlled. And I'm a type of guy that likes to touch the camera and move it around. Well, if you're union controlled, you can't touch the camera. Heavens, touch the camera. You know, chief engineer would come running in there and bang you on the head. So anyway, and Garry seemed to have the same attitude as that, because what he had to do, although we had 16 millimeter single sound on film cameras at the time, and I was showing Garry how to run the camera, because I'm explaining to him, we don't have a camera guy here. I mean, I can go with you on some of these shoots, but if you're gonna just take some raw footage of cutaways or something, you're gonna have to learn how to run the camera. Now, we also had a silent Bell and Howell camera, but this one was a sound on film camera. Oh boy, that was fun, because Garry's brain goes very slow down his neck to his arms to put the film in the camera. And he was always dropping the film. And I said, Garry, this is, wait a minute. So we go in the dark room. Garry goes, what are we going to do in the dark room? I said, well, we have a red light in there and you're exposing the film the way you're trying to put. So anyway, long story short, I'm showing how to load the camera.
Speed this one up.
He's all fingers. Well, anyway, he finally learned how to do it. And I showed him how to handle it. And we had to, anyhow, I'm coming down on Garry, but really this, if you were there, it would have been on candid camera anyhow. So we finally get the camera all set up. We go out to the news car and we're talking, put the camera on top of the car, put equipment in the back seat, and Garry's talking, blah, blah, blah. We get in the car. And so we start driving away. And we're jabbity, 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 jabbity. I don't know. We must have traveled how many blocks, Garry? 2, 3, 4 blocks? And I said, where the hell's the camera? Puts on the brakes. I go, oh no, my God. This is like, at the time, this was like a $20,000 camera. And I'm going, I said, oh boy, I got to teach this guy. I'm going on a news shoot with him. So anyway, I get out and I look, and the camera fortunately was there. I take it down off. I held it to my chest for the rest of the trip. We're driving. So we get to the news shoot. So you can tell the rest of it, Garry. I mean, that's my remembrance of Garry Armstrong.
Well, I forgot about the camera left on top of the car, but that was a sweet story following the setup I gave you as a mentor, which I'll still stick with that. The other one, and it's embarrassing to this day, and I've told the story a million times, yes, but I had gone out on assignment, and it was, I forget the nature of the story, but it was a scoop, and I was so proud of myself. And I came back to the building, my chest really pumping, and I said, hey guys, I've got it. It's a scoop. Channel 18 will lead the city with the story. And when the camera was opened, it was discovered there was no film in the camera. I had forgotten to put film in the camera. Duh. Thank you again, Peter, for establishing my credits there. It was a wonderful part of my career.
I wasn't going to tell that one because that's too embarrassing. And that was at least you were already.
I know where you're going with this. Yes, I felt like a dummy that day. I really did.
Well, guys, that's funny. When I was back in the days when I was directing, if people are asking if I was ready, I would say ready when you are, CB, which references, it's either an old joke or it's a true story that was told about Cecil B. DeMille, and it was back in his heyday in the silent film, and he was filming one of these epics, okay, with thousands of extras. And it was one of these things where they could only shoot it once because there was just too much money to do this twice. So to make sure that they got the shot, and this goes back to film, they had 3 cameras. They had the one main camera to get the shot. Then they had a backup camera to get the shot. And then up on top of a big hill overlooking the whole scene, they had the backup to the backup camera. And they were all connected by walkie-talkies, all right? So they filmed the scene, thousands of people, battle, blah, 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 and they finish it. And so CB says, cut, check the gate. Well, camera number 1 had a hair in the gate, which to people who don't understand film, you always had to check if you get a hair in the gate where the camera looks through, the shot is ruined, okay? So that was shot.
Right.
They go to camera 2. And the camera jammed. They didn't have the shot. So he gets on the phone to the guy up on the mountain. And he goes, did you get the shot? And the guy goes, ready when you are, CB. Now, I don't know if that's a true story or if it's a joke. But I tend to think it could. I want it to be a true story. So anyway, welcome to the show, Peter. Yeah. So Garry, you've got a couple of stories you wanted to do today.
Yes, I
what
do.
Was it?
And I want to be presented here as this veteran TV news reporter who's seen a lot and done a lot. But Peter Savioli has truly humbled me. The first story that I was thinking about involved Sophia Loren. This goes back, I believe, in the 1980s. She had come to Boston, and you would think this is a big deal for entertainment reporters or just people looking for features. A Hollywood star in Boston. Now, the thing was, on this day, she was in Boston solely to promote her perfume line, her cosmetics line. So I believe the news executives, I don't know whether they called each other and decided that way, but they decided this was not a real entertainment news story. She was here just to sell a product. So it probably to the news executives, it seemed like it was a huckster story, just a selling story, a promotion story. It wasn't like she was in to promote a movie or something like that. So they decided instead of sending reporters along with their camera crews, they would just send a camera crew and record it as what we called a VO or a voiceover. In other words, it would not get very much exposure on the newscast, but they would have enough video to say Sophia Loren was here. Well, I heard all about this, and I begged the assignment editor to send me along because I said I knew enough about Sophia Loren. I said, somehow we'll get a news story out of this. And I was warned, this is just a commercial venture. Don't try to make it more than it is. And I said, yes. So we got to the department store in downtown Boston, and I hung back as the other TV crews did their shots of Sophia Loren talking to the big crowd gathering around. And I don't remember any of the reporters there at that time. I just waited until the other cameras were done. And then I slowly walked over to Sophia Loren, and she smiled. And she said, why weren't you there with your microphone? And I said, well, I was just biding my time. And she said, you were smart. You were listening, weren't you? And I said, well, yes. And she said, I'm only here selling perfume. So I can understand why this isn't getting more news coverage. And I said, well, with you, Miss Loren, it's always news. And she just beamed at that note. And she said, well, why don't you stand this way, darling? I said, what? And it wasn't hearing loss. I heard what she said clearly. She said, why don't you stand this way, darling? And I said, why? And I didn't realize, but my camera crew was shooting all of this at that time. And she was positioning me so that, quote unquote, my best profile would be captured by the camera. And she said, darling, when we start talking, why don't you move this way? And I said, yes, Miss Loren. And she said, you can call me Sophia. I said, yes, ma'am. Don't call me ma'am. No, ma'am. Well, we got into the interview and she was saying, this is so boring, but it's how I make money when I'm not making movies. And I said, yes, it must be difficult for you. And she said, not at all, darling. This is all about money for me. And I said, well, you have come a long way since your movies back in the early 50s when you were doing movies like Open City and working with Vittorio De Sica and Fellini and all those other people. And she beamed because no one had talked about her early days in motion pictures. And she said, oh, darling, that's so wonderful. And she went on for about 3 minutes talking about what it was like when she was just a young actress in Hollywood, in Italy, rather. And she said, oh, darling, one other thing I liked about you. And I said, well, what do you mean? And I did stutter. And she said, you didn't look at my chest. I think I just froze at that point, and she smiled and she tapped me on the cheek and said, that's okay, darling. You can look at my chest. And the interview went on. And then she said, the funny thing about this is we've gotten more information in this interview than if you had come here to ask me about my latest movie. And I said, well, you did it all, Miss Loren. And she said, darling, just turn around a little bit more and you'll have an even better profile. Well, we wrapped up the interview. It ran that night. And I totally forgot it, mind over matter. About a week later, I got a perfumed letter. This is true. I got a perfumed letter from Rome, handwritten from Sophia Loren, thanking me for doing the interview and thanking me for listening to her. And she said, you are a true gentleman, my darling. I will remember. Yours, Sophia, with love.
Wow.
Golly, that would make a whole day. And you know the rest of it, of course. Peter will attest to. I lost that letter. I had it in my apartment when I was living as a bachelor in Boston, and I put it in a safe place. It was so safe that I never found it again. But Sophia Loren was what was really priceless about that. We talk about gaffes and what people are really like off camera. She was a personality. She was a businesswoman, and she was just a down to earth person. Somehow grappling with that particular situation and taking a young reporter aside and giving him a few pointers.
That's amazing. Wow. That is so cool. So, Peter, your years yet back there, give us something.
So the experiences I had at Channel 18. I was telling this to Gary the other day, and he was chuckling. Now we're talking like in the 70s, I guess, late 60s, early 70s, somewhere around the 70s. I can't quite remember when. And television, color TV had just kind of come into the business, and we had a chief engineer who had a remote control color TV in his office. And at that time, technically, the remote controls aren't like they are now. Now they're controlled by a laser light or a sound. That had like a little clicker in it. Different tone clickers would either change the station or increase or decrease the volume. And that was about all it would do. And this guy was a hard nut. I mean, he was an excellent engineer. He kept all that antiquated equipment working pretty good, but he was hard to deal with. He had a personality like a zombie. And anyhow, so I was just leaving Gary's office in the newsroom, and the chief engineer's office is next to his. And I was on my way to my car, and I had the car keys in my hand and house keys and so on and so forth. So I says, "Hey, Gary, see you later." And I'm throwing the keys in the air, and all of a sudden I hear the newscaster's TV set go off, and he goes, "What the hell's wrong with this stuff?" And he goes up, and I look in his office. He's up there trying to fix it and so on and so forth. And I throw the keys up in the air again. The TV goes on. I'm going, okay. Now, having a kind of a mechanical engineer, electronics engineer, I'm going, wait a minute. The frequency of these keys are operating the TV. Huh. So I'm going around jiggling my keys throughout the whole station. All the TV sets are going on and off. They're calling the chief engineer. "Hey, there's something wrong with my TV. Come in and fix it." And of course, I go back and I see Gary, and Gary's busily working. He's not paying attention. And I go, Gary, watch this. And he goes, "What?" He didn't have the TVs on. I said, come here. We go down to the chief engineer's office. I watch, and I throw the keys up in the air, and he's going, "How you doing that?" I told him. Of course, Gary, he can't find the end of his fingers for anything. He's like, "What do you mean you're doing it? How are you doing that?" And I says, "It's the frequency and all this stuff." He goes, "I don't know about that stuff." So only Gary and I knew that I was going around the station doing this, changing the channels. So all during that time, I'm discovering all these new technologies, and Gary's still trying to figure out how to load the camera. So I goes, now having been being responsible for all of the programming and everything at the station, Gary comes up to me and says, "Petey, will you stop calling me Petey?" "Oh, Pietro." "All right, go ahead. What do you want?" He says, "I have an idea for a TV show." I says, "What? What is it?" Now, we all know, anybody who knows Gary knows he's a movie buff. He's probably got some of the first film that was done by Laurel and Hardy in his wallet somewhere. And he said, I want to do maybe an hour show and called Stars of the Silver Screen. Here we are trying to transition from that era into modern television. He wants to show old movies. I said, yeah, okay. Let me bounce it off of management. They're the ones with the money. I didn't bounce it off of management. I sold them on the idea because we were an independent station. We could do our own thing. So, okay, I'll leave it at that. And I'll let Gary tell the rest of it because he was the victim of it. Go ahead, Gary, tell him.
Okay. Let's say quickly that Channel 18 was owned at that time, if I'm correct, by RKO General. Now, the
Correct.
idea that I had, that I said was my idea, was not. I had stolen it from Joe Franklin, who worked for the RKO station in New York City, WOR, Channel 9,
Yeah.
who had been, and they had a show called, what is it? I'm having a senior moment. $1 Million Movie, which was the same theme. And I had watched $1 Million movies for years as a young man. That was where the idea came from. Well, I sold Peter on the idea, and I don't know whether you had to really refurbish that studio, but long story short, they had a whole seat for me, and they surrounded me with life-size dummies of major Warner Brothers stars like John Garfield and Edward G. Robinson and Paul Muni and Betty Davis. And my job simply was to introduce the movie, talk about the plot and the stars, and then they would roll the first segment of the movie, and I would run back into the newsroom and start working on the script for the 11 o'clock news. When the first break came up, somebody would yell at me because I knew I was hard of hearing and also very focused, and I would run out of the newsroom back into the movie studio, introduce the second segment of the movie, and all the while I was doing this, I would hold conversations with the dummies. And people would walk by and wonder, who is Garry talking to? It's just Garry in there, and he's surrounded by dummies. Is he talking to the dummies? Are the dummies talking to him? Well, for Channel 18, I think that became a very successful show. Did it not, Petey?
Yeah. Yep.
You're
well,
pausing.
Yeah, you got to admit, Garry, when the lights are out and somebody went in there, you turned the studio lights on, and they saw this thing was in the corner, was permanently there in the corner with all these figures on there, and this surreal. One empty seat
very surreal.
In the middle. It really was impressive.
And remember, I was also doing dialogue. I was also doing dialogue for our dummies. For instance, talking to Edward G. Robinson. I would set him up with a line, and then I would have Eddie G respond to me, except that I was talking as Eddie G, and I would say, yeah, sure, kid, yeah, sure, and I would answer him. So I guess it must have seemed really bizarre to see me doing 2 or 3 voices, and the only other people in the studio were these life-size dummies with me holding back and forth conversation. It must have seemed truly bizarre. Do you remember our news director, who we won't mention his name, but at some point he used to sit in his studio, or rather sit in his office with the lights out, and he would be reaching for invisible insects? You're pausing because you're thinking about litigation, but I think he's long gone, but I think I've told the story in other areas that the suit we worked for at that point, and it was late 60s, 69, I think. He did sit in his studio with lights out, and I would walk by the office and I would see him reaching, and this is long before Cuckoo's Nest, and I wondered what was going on. I think someone told me at some point in his pre-news life that he was a boxer, a fighter, so that may have explained some of the behavior we saw.
We've all got those stories. Just to button this up, because we've run out of time. All this stuff about directing and do it yourself. D counts down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and the director goes, and action. Now, that's about the amount of time between the entire crew goes, what? And the real director just reaches and goes, ready, camera 2, ready to roll tape, ready, okay, camera 2, take 2, right, roll tape, track this, and he directs the whole show. Because this guy, he had no idea that he was supposed to do that, because that's not what real directors do. So it was like, I wish I could have been there. Well, anyway, we've done it again. We have run our mouths off for another half hour. Peter, excellent, thank you. Go ahead. Say what you want.
I just got one more story here, very short, to tie this together about working in the business back then as compared to now, and the nostalgia trips we go on. And it would be interesting to get some response from people who may have worked in the industry back in the 60s and 70s and 80s. But there was this one newscaster. This was at Channel 40. I was working at Channel 40. I was a cameraman at the time. And his name was John Deegan. This guy was a veteran newscaster, the old school type, the one you really respected and you believed him. And he had a certain style of doing the show. And so when we were talking, and he was always kind of complaining of the way the industry was changing. And he says, and we're all sitting around, we went to the local bar after the news. This was the 7 o'clock news, and we'd have a drink or have a bite to eat. And I remember he's sitting there, and I said, John, what are you thinking about? He says, in television, nothing changes except the call letters. And I'm going, that's true. I worked at 5 different TV stations. You guys worked at different TV stations, network, and down to the level I was in with independent. And it's true. The same personalities you find as the directors and producers and, the on-air people. How true.
Yep, that is true.
Yep.
Well, good. All right, and that's because we're out of time. Listen, thank you guys. This was absolutely awesome. Now, of course, for the mandatory plugs, because, well, we sort of have to. First off, of course, our sister podcast, Get Off My Lawn, starring, me, where we talk about life, the universe, and whatever else is in the teleprompter. And then, of course, we have Voicescapes Audio Theater for the best in audio theater drama and production. I know because I'm in it. And, of course, we cannot forget Serendipity, Seeking Intelligent Life on Earth, the blog that Marilyn, Gary's wife, and Gary contributes to, and I contribute to, and we all contribute to it. We have yet to find any actual intelligent life on Earth. So again, I want to thank you guys so much. I hope we will do many more of these, and I hope we have some more surprises. There was a couple of stories we didn't get to, which we will, of course, get to on the next show. So until then, see you guys.